Hi, I'm Doug Austin, and I'm the editor of eDiscovery Today, a daily blog about eDiscovery, information governance, cybersecurity, and data privacy trends, best practices, and case law. Welcome to another edition of eDiscovery Today's Thought Leader Interview Series, where we interview thought leaders in eDiscovery and related legal technologies. Today, we're conducting another thought leader interview by video. And our guest is Julia Hasenzahl, founder and CEO of ProSearch. Welcome, Julia.
Thank you.
Good to have you. Julia is responsible for defining the vision and long-term strategy for the company alongside overseeing day-to-day operations. With a team of directors spanning all business units, Julia can realize innovation and expect operational excellence to achieve company goals in client delivery, new business development, and account retention. Prior to starting ProSearch, Julia was COO of BMC Group, a legal and compliance support service provider. After joining BMC early in the startup process, Julia built service delivery teams and processes to support organizational growth. Following 2003's tremendous growth, BMC was recognized in the Inc. 500, Inc. magazine's list of the nation's fastest growing private companies. Also, during 9 years at Ernst & Young, Julia held numerous practice and client support positions, including national manager of an enterprise-wide shared service function. Ready to get started, Julia?
Yep.
All right.
Feeling old now, but I'm ready to get started.
Well, you know, that beats the alternative, right?
That's right. That's right.
All right. So, Julia, we're more than 2 years since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, and a lot has changed for business and society in general. What do you think have been the most significant changes from an eDiscovery standpoint during that time? And what do you think the future of work will look like going forward?
Well, the future of work is my favorite topic, and I've spent, I joke that researching the future of work was sort of my sourdough bread of the pandemic. And I spent a lot of time, more time than I should admit, doing that. But I think from an eDiscovery perspective, I think the most significant thing to me is a shift around the way we actually work. Prior to the pandemic, we worked with providers and law firms and managed review vendors, and just the way we worked changed overnight. And I think that it was successful in that shift, but I've been surprised that there hasn't been more of a shift back to really requiring people to be in an office, review in particular. And so I think that, to me, it's not what has happened that was the big change, it's what will happen. And I think that in order to continue to working this way, we really need to prove that it is a successful model when we don't have a pandemic backing us up, that we can work securely, that we can manage confidential information. And it's interesting to me that before the pandemic, it was assumed we can't do that. We need to control where people are. And overnight, we changed our minds about it. And I think that we're all working and working to protect clients' data, protect the work we're doing. But I guess I just don't understand how we were able to flip that switch. And I think it's really upon us as discovery providers to make sure that we're operating in a way that doesn't flip that switch back if it's valuable.
Well, it makes sense. And certainly one aspect of that switch being flipped was a move to the cloud, I'm sure you'd probably agree. And part of the move to the cloud has been the move from desktop office solutions to Microsoft 365 and G Suite. So what do you think are some of the biggest eDiscovery challenges that have been introduced by the migration to those cloud-based office productivity platforms?
I think it's a combination of how fast they're moving and how slowly they're moving at the same time. So I think it was maybe 5 years ago at Legal Week, I think the expectation was that Microsoft would essentially have a solution that would replace the processing we were doing, and that we would have data coming out of Security and Compliance Center that didn't require processing. And it hasn't turned out that way. The challenge has actually become something else, and that is both the challenge of moving data from the cloud in and out of the cloud, but also just the rapid pace at which the tools available in 365 are changing the way people communicate and work. And so the discovery challenge has shifted in those 5 years away from just processing that data to new data types, but also trying to define a discovery solution against a technology that is changing so rapidly. And so people are looking for, how do I collect from Google, or how do I collect from Microsoft? And the answer is really, how do I collect now, not how do I collect? And I think that I think we need a mind shift that it's an evolution and a process and not a solution, because those tools are just going to change more rapidly. And we're not going to get to a point like we did with email where it's, we know everything about it, nothing's going to go wrong. You know, I'm sure you remember when, oh, tiffing in color, how will we tiff in color? You know, and I think we had
Absolutely.
like 5 or 10 years where we knew how to do everything. And now we're kind of starting over, and there's an expectation that, well, we will have a solution that is the solution and done, you know, we can go back to that. And it's not going to be that way for a long time. And technology, again, is way ahead of discovery.
Yeah, I agree completely. It's like you're always trying to hit a moving target. So certainly agree with that. And certainly another part to that, as well as another part to the move to the cloud, has been the dramatically increased use of collaboration apps like Slack, Teams, and Zoom. So what recommendations do you have for automating eDiscovery workflows for these newer forms of communication and collaboration?
Well, it'll sound crazy, but part of me says don't. I feel like there, again, same sort of answer. There is a rush to have a final process and a solution, and to actually invest in development to solve today's problem. And you are necessarily building a solution that will be obsolete, possibly by the time you finish it. So if you're trying to automate something, you really have to be looking at, what is Microsoft's roadmap? Because if it's going to take me 6 months to build a custom solution, and they're 9 to 12 months away from adding it to a tool, you have to really look at what's the value proposition with the cost associated with that customization, if it's going to be obsolete that quickly. And I think there's a lot of tension there right now, where our clients and potential clients want a solution to a fixed solution to a moving problem. And I think automation is good, but it needs to be low overhead, low investment. It needs to be simple scripting, because if you're looking to build some sort of monolithic tool to address another monolithic tool, you are going to be behind, you're going to spend a fortune. You know, we're not going to outspend Microsoft. There's some new features in Microsoft where here at ProSearch, we let people use all the features. And so I feel like we experience what you can do in Teams ahead of our clients who lock features down. And I look at some of the things that are happening and I think, look, this isn't even a document anymore, but our model is still, how do we turn this back into a document? And it stopped being a document. It's data and it's assets. And so it's more like content asset management, and how do you organize that and present it for review. And so I think if we're automating a solution to turn this data back into a document, that solution has a very short shelf life against the pace of this change.
Couldn't agree more. The document paradigm is alive and well when it comes to eDiscovery, still as we work with it today. So yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So changing topics here, we hear so much about AI and machine learning these days, but the adoption always seems to lag quite a bit behind the hype. So why do you think that is, and what can be done to get more legal professionals to be more open about adopting AI and machine learning technologies?
I think resetting expectations. I think that we myself included, you know, have talked a lot about AI, artificial intelligence, and that sets an expectation for some magic and for a machine to do something for you. And the truth is, the solutions we have in discovery are human-enabled machine learning solutions. And I think that the surprise is that we still need the humans. And so when, first of all, there's a lot of tools. I would say all of the tools are very good. You could use any of them and get really great results, but all of them require a skilled human being to operate them, and they require somebody with knowledge to train them. That's true even if you have a pre-trained model. You know, pre-trained models are the thing right now, and it's like, it's not untrained, it's pre-trained. So there's still a point at which somebody trains this model. And I think that people are waiting for the solution that doesn't require that and doesn't require that energy and input. And I think in a lot of ways, active learning is that, because it disguises the fact that somebody is training the machine, and the results are different and they're satisfying, but it doesn't always lead to an elimination of review. And so I think that one of the challenges is changing the conversations. But talking to Gina Toronto, our director of applied sciences, earlier today, we were discussing the fact that a client recently said something to the effect of, "Oh, the solutions don't work." And digging into that conversation, they didn't mean the solutions didn't work. They meant the solutions don't work without training, without somebody annotating documents, without somebody coding documents. And it's well, no, that is actually how they work. And so I think that we did ourselves a disservice by trying to overhype the AI part of it and not be upfront about the training of the data that's required. And so I think we have to think of two things, like annotation is required, which I would call data labeling, but for some of these technologies, you're not going anywhere unless you stop and label some data. And I think we have to make that a known thing, not a black box thing, so that people understand that's part of the process. And then it can evaluate the value proposition of it differently. But when you're trying to do it against the idea that the machine is magical and AI will just on its own think of something for you, it's kind of disappointing. It's disappointing to find out humans have to do something. And I think that was a mistake in the marketing. And I think if we regrouped and said, here's what humans need to do, here's the most efficient way for them to do it, to train this machine to get the best results, I think we would move towards greater adoption instead of acting like we can work humans out of a process that is machine learning, that therefore is dependent on machine training.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, even back in 2012, Judge Peck said our technology-assisted review, which of course is machine learning, isn't a Staples easy button. And I think too many people are looking for that. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, like any system, you get out of it what you put into it. And I think that because people didn't understand the technology, we tried to mask the fact that you had to put something into it and make it seem like you don't have to put something into it. And then that just sets the wrong expectation for the solution itself.
Yeah, it certainly does. So another area that intersects with eDiscovery is data privacy. And with GDPR, CCPA, and other data privacy laws regularly being adopted, what should legal professionals know to address the ever-changing data privacy landscape today?
I think that GDPR obviously has been a focus for years, and CCPA the same thing now on the tail of it, but it hasn't really created the swell of demand for privacy solutions in eDiscovery yet. And I don't think that's where the push is going to come from. I think the push is coming from government agencies and regulators who are saying, as part of their production, do not send us private information. Do not expose PII in a deliverable to us. And so I think that it's not complying with those regulators on the privacy side. It's complying with entities who don't want to receive private information that they will then be responsible for. And I think that might drive a focus of privacy in eDiscovery that's more like privilege. So I think we need a different kind of technology and tool to say, again, there will be some training of the technology involved, but to do a better job of identifying potentially private information and PII, and then have it exposed in the review so that you can have a conversation about what you're going to do with it. Are we going to redact it? Do we have to have the equivalent of a log of the private information? Are we going to withhold documents based on the fact that there's private information? And so I think that the push to not have it in a production will be the thing that drives privacy, and then it'll be treated more like a privileged process.
Makes perfect sense. So certainly there's increasing buzz about the metaverse, and some are calling it the next internet. But a lot of people don't seem to know what it is, much less what to expect from it. So what do you think it will be, and what should legal professionals know about preparing for it?
Well, I think some ProSearchers have contributed to the chatter about the metaverse by doing some very clever presentations at some conferences. And I wanted to kind of stick my head in a bucket and say, that's clever, we don't have to think about it. But the reality is that the kind of metaverse that they're talking about, where we go work in a virtual space, I don't think that is going to impact us as soon as the fact that people can do training. People can, like if you're designing a product and you're teaching a person how to use it in a virtual reality situation, and then you have some sort of product liability litigation. Oh, well, how did you train people? What was the training? What was the simulation? And so now it's evidence in that sense that you can't turn over your training manual and your specs in the same way. And you can't say that every single person experienced their hands-on training. I think there's some commercials out there where they show somebody learning to perform surgery, you know? So how do you say this is the training they experienced when everybody's experience was different? And then also that the content of the training isn't in a format that can be easily produced. And so I think that that's where we'll see virtual reality challenges before we have to worry about them replacing or adding to our work communications. I think that's clever and interesting, but I think that the adoption of that at a level that's really impactful is probably further off than the actual practical applications of virtual reality, where we see the analog and digital companions to that, or predecessors to that, in eDiscovery now. And so when you move that to virtual reality, then we have to assume we'll see those there as well.
Yeah, sure, it certainly
But
makes sense.
it's much more fun to do a conference on the other metaverse than it is to do a training one. But it is, you know, it's real, and I think that we have examples of real business use cases for it that will intersect with litigation.
Sure. Well, and I would imagine, and this dovetails with an earlier comment when you talked about the moving target of ESI, and the more we get into the metaverse, the more we'll have other newer or different sources of ESI to deal with in litigation.
Yep.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. So, so Julia, obviously I don't have to tell you this, but despite best efforts to avoid them, mistakes happen frequently within eDiscovery workflows. And I know because I cover many cases where mistakes are made, and I just recently covered a couple of doozies, including the Alex Jones debacle. So with that in mind, what recommendations do you have for our audience to minimize mistakes in their own eDiscovery processes?
Alex Jones was quite a debacle. I would say that first, our corporate clients operate at a different level, where I don't think we are frequently going to see that debacle. But I think it's a commitment to quality, because you can have practices, you can have QC sets, you can have even programs to programmatically QC something. But if you don't have a client, a law firm, and a vendor who are equally committed to quality, somebody's going to break that down and errors will happen. And so I think our greatest success from a quality perspective is being able to combine the workflows we have and the technology we have with clients who demand high quality and outside counsel who wants that same level of quality so that none of us is the weak link in that chain. Because if we have processes that protect us from mistakes, but somebody comes along and says, yes, but I don't have time for that process, I want to skip those steps. And I think it's a lack of commitment to quality says we can skip the quality steps. And when you skip the quality steps, you make mistakes. And then at the end, everybody's like, well, we skipped all those steps. And if you allow that to happen and aren't committed to quality, it will happen. All the tools and all the processes in the world, which I'm very proud of ours. I think the most important thing we do is partner with our clients to say, let's not skip any of the important steps we put in place to protect ourselves that ensure quality.
Makes sense. You
And
almost have
again, you know, it's one of those things where the tech part of it is easy. The people part of it is really hard. And so you need that human commitment.
yeah, you almost have to be enforcer in a way sometimes with your clients to make sure they don't skip those steps, right?
Right. And that's where, you know, you need a client who's going to back you up that has the same quality concerns that you have and supports that.
Yeah, absolutely. So last question, what would you like our audience to know about what you and ProSearch are doing?
What I would like people to know about ProSearch is that we're evolving. I think we've been known for a very specific thing, a very specific kind of service delivery around corporate clients. And over the last 5 years, we've really expanded our services and changed our service model so that we're able to support a variety of clients who want to engage with us in more ways, in different ways, whether it's on our platform or through Rel One or partnering with their partners or partnering with their in-house teams. We have more options in the way that we deliver services, but our core objective is still the same, and that is to work with clients who want to manage eDiscovery as a business process. And that's what we're good at. We're not reactive firefighters. In fact, we're not very good at that at all. We're really about doing eDiscovery well, taking what we learned from a matter, applying it to the next matter, growing with a client, improving our processes with a client. And we've developed more models where we can do that successfully. And we've expanded beyond, I think, what people think we've been doing.
All right. So I want to thank my guest, Julia Hasenzahl of ProSearch, for the interview. Thanks, Julia. Glad you could be here today.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
And I want to thank all of you for tuning in to another edition of eDiscovery Today's Thought Leader Interview Series. See you next time on the eDiscovery Today video network. Goodbye.